Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I am your host, Rich Lieberman, Cal Mesa lead consultant with the Center for Distance and Online Learning, CDAL, of the Los Angeles County Office of Education, LACO. I want to welcome you to the third in a series of webcasts sponsored by CDAL and the California County Superintendent's Region 11 K-12 Student Mental Health Initiative. These are your Cal Mesa Proposition $63 at work. And we are coming to you live from LACO, and this will be an interactive webcast. If you look below your screen, you will see a chat box where you can add questions and comments you have throughout the broadcast. If we don't get to your questions during the broadcast, we will respond to you afterwards. In our two previous webcasts, we explored suicide and bully prevention in the schools. Today, we hope to advance the discussion of bully prevention to talk about addressing the most frequent form of bullying in schools, gender-based bullying, with the ultimate goal of assuring safe schools for all students. Our aim for this webcast is to present you with information about what schools need to know to address gender-based bullying and discrimination, what policies currently exist, and some concrete recommendations on how to deal with it for LA County school districts. Today, we welcome back to the desk two very special guests and experts in gender-based bullying. I'd like to introduce Sarah Train, who is the coordinator of Project SPIN.
Hi, Rich. Thank you so much for having me back. This is great.
Tell us a little bit about Project SPIN.
Certainly. Project SPIN is a partnership between the LA Gay and Lesbian Center and LA Unified School District. We have been working together collaboratively for the last 3+ years and look to really support all schools within LA County. Our website is projectspin.org, and we have lots of information that I'm sure we're going to get into today.
Yes, and about that information, thank you so much for contributing to the content and all the special clips that we have for our guests today.
My pleasure.
Thanks. And Dr. Judy Chasen from Los Angeles Unified School District. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Rich, for having me back on the show and for being here with you and Sarah. It is wonderful to have this partnership with LACO and the LA Gay and Lesbian Center, and particularly for starting this very important conversation today. It's an important one that all of our schools are concerned about.
And I'm very excited to jump right in.
Okay, let's do it.
So, I have to be honest with you. I was not always the buff dude you see before you today. And you can imagine what I looked like when I was 9 years old. I grew up in the schoolyards of Brooklyn, where I first became aware of pressures for boys to be boys. It was almost like we had to be Superman all the time. If you didn't act or behave in an expected fashion, well, there were plenty of hurtful words and intimidating acts to help keep you in line. In order to explore this a little with you, my experts, I found this little clip I want to start off with and get your opinions.
Okay.
What can we do? Bias, Bullying, and Bystanders from welcomingschools.org spotlights teachers in the classroom generating open discussions with students about the impact of bullying and the power of students standing up for each other. Welcomingschools.org offers tools, lessons aligned with Common Core state standard, and resources for elementary school on embracing diversity, avoiding gender stereotyping, and ending bullying and name-calling. Educators and parents can find materials necessary to create learning environments in which all students are welcome and respected. Let's watch.
Piggy, weirdo, ugly, stupid.
Sometimes they tease me that I'm short, and sometimes just because I'm a girl.
Your religion is fake and it's not real.
You're gay. You shouldn't be in this school. You're brown. You're wearing a girl shirt. And I was like, okay, I'll change my shirt.
If a student isn't feeling safe or comfortable, they aren't focusing on what I'm teaching them.
We know bullying happens in our school. What can we do about this?
What makes you feel safe at school? Tomorrow?
Teachers?
A new kid calls your friend Gay.
I would get help from an adult because adults know more about this kind of situation.
I would just ignore it because I really wouldn't know how to handle it.
I would have said, my aunt's gay and you can't change it.
Blue was a quiet color. Red liked to pick on blue.
It makes fun of the way you are and everything, and you can't help what you are.
Has anybody ever heard anybody get called a name because of their skin color?
They called him chocolate balls. When we have discussion like that in class, I feel like more comfortable. Well, when I was in first grade, this big girl kept on flicking me in the head
So that hurt.
in 2 ways.
What are the 2 ways?
One physically, one mentally.
If all of these people stood straight up like an arrow and said no,
No.
do you think it would help?
To me, it's a no-brainer. You have to make sure that our students are comfortable talking about difference so that they can ease into their learning and feel confident in their growth.
Wow, Mom, I'm trying to do something and you messed it all up.
2 or 3 kids came up to me right after the lesson and they wanted to tell me about things that were said to them that hurt. Meant that that was a success. I'm sorry.
Very touching.
Yeah, incredible.
Very touching. Reaction.
You know, this film is just so powerful because it really sets up the conversation from a broad perspective. We saw the students, you know, I just get picked on for being a girl or because of the shirt that I'm wearing. And this is actually what we just saw is a trailer of a longer film that our audience members can certainly have access to if they go to the website. Welcoming Schools has provided just such a great resource. And I'm glad we start with this because it really introduces the complexity of discussing gender and bullying and kind of our own bias and how that all comes together. So I felt that it's a really great way to get us started, certainly.
Judy?
And we see how sensitive and insightful these children are. I mean, that's what really warmed my heart, was they care about each other, they care about their hearts. It's just, you know, it's the innocence and the beauty of children was wonderful.
I was affected when he said 2 ways.
Yeah.
It hurt me 2 ways. I want to ask you to give us a sense, where do people's view on typical gender roles start?
You know, it's a great question because I think often even before a baby is born, we have already set up some type of a relationship that we're going to have with this baby, right? Whether it's a blue baby shower or a pink baby shower, the games are different, the gifts are different, and we haven't even met this young person. And our society has really created a dynamic that ascribes a certain value to and characteristics to certain genders. And even before a person is born, that becomes a part of the way that they interact with people. And I think that it really impacts then later how we interact with each other. And certainly once we get into school and we see how different cultures come together, right? Different families coming together with their own understanding of what fits in within the box of a certain gender norm, you see, well, that's different than what happens in my house. And that's why it's so important to talk about this in elementary school, because that is where we start learning about differences and we start seeing those differences coming out.
And that's when they start to put those limitations on themselves and each other.
Yes,
and
certainly. And start policing each other.
Exactly. You know, from a very young age, we start, you know, our children will echo what we model for them.
Yeah.
And we'll tell each other that you need to behave in a certain way and you can't try something new because that's a little bit outside the norm. And they cut off opportunities.
Certainly.
How do we see sexism and gender bias in the schools? What does it look like?
You know, I think that for most of our schools, it is still the value of what is masculinity and femininity. I mean, you can have tomboys, but for young boys, being more feminine is often where a lot of the harassment and teasing or just feeling different, like you're other, that's not okay. You're kind of outside of the box of what boys do and what girls do. And inherent in there is still that value that somehow masculinity is higher than femininity. So anything that is a little bit more feminine, liking a color pink or liking to color versus others, being more nurturing or caring, those are all experiences that I think become difficult for our young students to navigate.
Absolutely. Anything that's feminized is almost kind of put in second place. Now, we don't mind if our girls are a little bit more masculine. We actually encourage them to do that.
Yeah.
But we don't give that same latitude to our boys.
I remember being harassed at camp for watching a movie with my legs crossed.
Wow.
And I still remember it to this day. It was as if it happened yesterday.
Interesting.
And you bring up a good point that it's even a perception, right? It's not necessarily an actual something that somebody is deciding about themselves, but even a perception or some type of association with that can already set us up for being ridiculed.
I think I know the answer to this one, but inquiring minds out there want to know, are boys more impacted by gender-based bullying or girls?
Wow, well that is certainly something that we discuss a lot, because when we look at interventions and who's impacted the most, right, it's really important to talk about this in broad terms and making sure that everybody feels included in the conversation. But I do think it's harder for boys to ask for help, because inherently in our understanding about being masculine, right, you mentioned it in the beginning of our intro, just how you're taught to be a superhero. So does a superhero ask for help? It's certainly difficult.
Superhero solves things now.
Exactly. And so just asking for help and encouraging boys in that help-seeking behavior as a protective factor for many things, but certainly in our own development, is challenging because of that value of masculinity, that if you ask for help, that somehow makes you less masculine. And I do think that impacts our young boys in a very specific way. Judy, what do you think?
I think that the emotional life of boys is often overlooked. Is that we're going to tend to be a little more caring and nurturing about our girls and taking care of them if we feel or fear that they've been injured. But we expect our boys to be rough and rugged and not feel any type of pain. The bullying that happens on campus from a very young age is often gender specific. That girls, as they get a little bit older, the bullying for them tends to be a little bit sexualized, about their bodies, their activities. Whereas with males, they're constantly ridiculed if for any reason they're not considered masculine enough.
Yeah.
This is one reason why we see in the extreme higher rates of suicide amongst males as opposed to females, because boys are a little bit less inclined to ask for help or to seek mental health services. Yeah. Another question I have involves gender-neutral spaces. We've heard people talk about gender-neutral spaces. Is it possible to have these at school? What does a gender-neutral space look like at school?
I think there's a lot of ways that we can create spaces where everybody's gender is accepted and celebrated. And it's, as we were discussing earlier, it's not about gender becoming the barrier, right?
Correct.
It's really about accepting and valuing everybody's gender.
Exactly. I know sometimes when we have this conversation, people wonder if we're going to erase gender. And everything will be co-ed and everything will be completely neutral. That's not going to happen. We're still in a very gendered society. We're still always going to have, for a long time anyway, boys' restrooms and girls' restrooms. So we're not erasing gender. What we're trying to erase is the bias that's placed on it.
And I think that where gender-neutral conversations and spaces are important and are in teachable moments.
Yes.
Where we can really discuss the complexities of our own bias, our own cultural lenses, and how that dictates the broader conversation around gender. And that's certainly one of the areas that we're going to be talking about later.
And exploring a little bit more today for sure. Yes. I'd like to take a moment to step back and have a brief discussion about gender now. From your perspectives, what is the bigger picture of our society's view on gender? Judy, I'll have you start.
Sure. Well, I think it takes most of us a minute to kind of step back and reflect on the gender norms and biases that we've been raised with. Most of us, it was just very, very much a part of our family and our culture. I know in my family, my brother was treated differently, sometimes more harshly, than my sisters and I were. So it was something that we didn't even question. It was just part of who we were. And this has been going on for many, many generations. Our society has been very clear, almost rigid, about the gender roles, the behavioral expectations that were associated with for anybody based on what their gender was. That because you're male or female, are you supposed to pursue a different path? Are you supposed to wear a certain attire, have certain interests? We have had some huge steps, you know. We have seen changes in our own lifetime. There's greater equality of pay. There's less rigidity about interests that people can pursue. We have women who are firefighters and men who are being stay-at-home dads. A generation ago, my parents' generation, that would not have happened. And so we've got progress, and at the same time, there's still gaps, right? There still is a gap that many of the decisions that we make, even on a daily basis, are gendered. We don't even realize it. You know, the deodorant, the color of our car, the clothes, our profession, I mean, so much of the choices that we make in our life are gendered. We tend to somehow go there and not even aware that we've been kind of conditioned and cultured to do so.
What has made the most impact on gender equity in our society?
Well, I would like to think that the women's movement has had something to do with this.
I would agree with you.
Yes. Women have been pushing for a long time, you know, demanding that there be better equity in all aspects of society. Women really, really pushing back. When I was in school, I shared that I went to school, girls couldn't wear pants because those were boys' clothes. So, you know, things have changed in that respect. We have better equity of pay. We're getting a little bit closer. About 40% of women actually make similar to, if not possibly more, money than their male partners. Yet with that, we also see that only about 20% of women hold the highest levels in organizations or in government, like CEOs or in Congress or Senate. So we're making some progress. We're definitely not at that 50% yet. And that also has a parallel, I believe, changes with men. Because as women are stepping forward and saying, you know, demanding more equity, men are saying, wait a second, what about me? Don't tell me because I'm a guy that, you know, I can't feel, I can't emote, I can't care about my appearance. I can't get teary-eyed at a movie.
I can't cross my legs at that movie.
I can't cross my legs at the movie, exactly. You know, or want to be, you know, take my kid to the park and just play on the swings. And so, you know, this is a joint journey that I think that we are taking together.
Yeah, and everything that Judy has just outlined really impacts our students from the minute they come onto our school campuses, because all of that is the understanding that they bring with them. And what they hear their friends say is, you know, what's cool, and if this boy fits outside of their box and this girl fits outside and that's not cool, then that informs how they treat each other. And so I think that although there's a broader discussion in our society about equity, we see it play out even in very young ages where they understand those messages that they're receiving. Maybe this is a good time for us to kind of set a scene and start talking about some statistics regarding gender-based bullying and the prevalence that we see in our schools. In a survey of California students, they surveyed about 2,400 students. What we saw is that 23% of those students reported being harassed because they were not, quote, as masculine as other guys or as feminine as girls. And that's a staggering number, that 23% of those students could identify having had that experience. In a national survey of elementary students, over 1,000 of them, the number one reason why students say that they're bullied at school is because of the way they look, right? Which could just be a bad haircut, but that's the number one reason why they're bullied. And 40% of students say that they hear that kids at school say that there are things that boys should not do. And certainly there's the same reaction about what girls should not do. So going back to what we were talking about earlier, they police themselves, and a lot of that tone gets set before they even get to school.
Those numbers are just remarkable to me. Judy, do you have a reaction to those? I can see your face.
Sure. I think policing is a really strong word, and I like that, because it's, as children are trying to learn about themselves, that they often are they're trying to control others, and they are sometimes ridiculing others. They're saying, at least I'm not, and pointing out what they consider negative differences in others makes them feel more powerful, more affirmed in themselves. Right. Which is sad.
Yeah, and we can do so much in this conversation in helping guide those teachable moments. Yes. Yeah.
I think this would be a helpful time to discuss definitions. Okay,
Yes.
Because you've thrown a lot of terms, and I want to know exactly. I want you to share some different perspectives on this discussion for our audience. So, Sarah, can you walk us through some of these definitions?
Sure. I think it's really helpful if we have some common understanding in this discussion. So let's first start with gender. Gender we define as a socially constructed system of classification that ascribes qualities of masculinity and femininity to people. It's often seen and described as a spectrum. Gender characteristics can change over time. For some people that changes very frequently, and for others it's something set. And also our cultures have a lot to do with that. Our cultures dictate what we understand to be gender and masculine or feminine. Often gender is used synonymously with sex, but that's inaccurate, because sex refers to the physical and biological characteristics, and gender is more the social and emotional attributes that we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I got it.
Okay. Well, let me talk about gender identity. So we all have a gender identity. And gender identity is about who you are. It's not who you're attracted to. It's what in the core of your being you feel that you were born as. So you were born male, born female, maybe somewhere in between. Mm-hmm. But it's something that's internal, unrelated to what one's body looks like. So it's that inner identity. It's sometimes the same gender or same sex we were assigned at birth, but not always.
Yeah. And the next, I think, other definition that is really important to understand is gender expression.
Exactly.
And so how do you describe gender expression?
Well, again, I would say everybody has a gender expression, and so it's just how one chooses to present themselves to the world. So that could be their attire. Some people will actually pick a different name for themselves than the one that they had legally, that they were christened with. So it could be hairstyle, it could be speech, it could be jewelry, accessories. It's that external presentation that we bring up, that we select. We design it ourselves.
And how does gender expression and our gender identity line up with sexual orientation?
Well, sexual orientation is yet another variable, and good question. Thank you for bringing that up. So our sexual orientation talks about who it is that we're attracted to. Whereas our gender identity is something core to our being, our sexual orientation says who romantically we wish to partner with. So it's about our attractions, it's about the other person.
All right.
Okay.
Sometimes they're confused, so thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Well, another experience that I want to discuss today that's near and dear to me, and that's individuals that identify as transgender, the T in LGBT. I want to share an interview I had recently with a young person, and I asked them to help us understand what transgender means. Listen to Zoe.
Hi, my name is Zoe. I'm 12. I'm in 7th grade. I identify by she and her pronouns, and I am also trans. Well, basically, preferred gender pronouns means that someone wants to be known as a boy or a girl, or in other words, he or she or him or her, and also that it doesn't really matter what someone assumes, it's basically what the person feels inside. I think the best meaning of transgender means is when a person is marked at birth as a certain gender and they know that in their heart that they're not that gender, so they change what they were known as birth as into what they prefer to be known as. So like either they could be male to female, which means that a person was born male but knows that they were born in their heart as female, or female to male, which basically means someone was born female at birth but knows in their heart that they are male. Or they could just be like, well, I just want to be notified as a person, not really as a gendered, which is called agendered.
Isn't she wonderful? She absolutely brilliant.
Adorable.
Adorable. And because what she's able to do is be very articulate, you know, and explain that transgender is having a gender identity, an internal core identity that may differ from what was assumed at birth.
Right. And for transgender is somewhat of a broad identity as well, because even people who identify transgender might identify other ways as well, gender queer, gender fluid, gender variant, and all of those fit within that maybe a shared experience. And Zoe is so articulate and really sharing from her own perspective.
I was so grateful to Zoe for sharing from her own voice how she defines transgender. Now let's discuss the intersection between gender bias and transgender bias. Okay, so Judy, I'm going to turn to you for this one.
Good point, because both forms of bias are very similar in that the students are sharing the experience of feeling ridiculed somehow for not following norms about what are associated with being boy versus being associated with being girl. All of that idea of how you're supposed to behave. And while much of bullying that students experience is grounded in sexualized or biased gender norms, transgender students seem to experience inordinately high levels of bullying. And so when we're looking at the stats, and I appreciate the statistics because it gives us yet another framework to talk about the experience. We find that about 62% of students who identify as transgender report being harassed or discriminated against based on their gender expression.
Wow.
Okay, and about 57% of those students report that this has been chronic, that it has happened frequently or more than once. And so for them it's particularly chronic. Another study was GLSEN, Gay Lesbian Straight Educators Network. They found that up to 80% of transgender students, and this is across the country, reported feeling unsafe at school. Wow. So when 80% of our students are afraid to come to school, we have a serious problem.
Which brings us to what we're talking about, is really ensuring that our schools are safe for all students.
Absolutely. And sadly, we do see higher suicide rates in transgender youth and adults. And bullying plays a role, not necessarily the cause, but it plays the role.
In the environment.
In the environment, certainly.
Yep.
Let's take a question. Okay, we have a question from our audience. What are examples of policies that address gender in schools? So they're asking about policies.
Okay. Well, I can take this one. And when we look at policy and laws, I think we need to go as far back as 2000, which is now 14 years ago, with California Safety Violence Protection Act, also known as AB 537. And this law that was passed added gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation as protected classes. And this provided a lot of protection from discrimination and hostile environments for all of our students. And that it also states based on a perception or an actual gender identity, gender expression, and or sexual orientation. So it really gave us a lot of responsibility to making sure that all of our students had a safe place to learn. And that was in 2000. Speed forward to 2011, California passed the Gender Non-Discrimination Act, also known as AB 87, and this bill defined what gender identity was and gender expression. So now it gave us more of an understanding, and it created even more equity for students, and especially students who identified as transgender. And a lot of this language has been changing. We've been learning more, and so the laws and policies are really important in helping our students continue to address and evaluate how safe our schools are for all of our students and what we can be doing to improve the environment for them. Just last year, most recently, Governor Brown signed into law the Student Success and Opportunity Act.
I wanted to talk about this.
Yeah, AB 1266.
1266.
And I'm so glad we're talking about it today because currently it is being reviewed. The signatures that were collected are being reviewed to see that if it goes on to a referendum. And because of that, a lot of districts are kind of on hold in regards to the already taking action with this law. However, this law only further clarified what we already had in place.
I was going to ask you this. Is there anything new in this law?
Yeah, so there's language that is new that helps clarify what is the responsibility of schools in protecting transgender and gender variant students. However, those protections were there, and now we have greater clarification and more understanding as to the access for sex-segregated programs, activities, and or facilities that are, we certainly are open to all of our students.
Judy, and here's for LAUSD. LAUSD has a transgender policy already, right? How has that worked out? Are there any problems? Are there any complaints? Hysteria?
No, there have not been.
Amazing.
Amazing, yes. We've had transgender affirming policies since 2005. So we're going on almost a decade of actual formal policies within our schools. And as Sarah was saying, the Student Success and Opportunity Act just merely reiterated non-discrimination laws that were present in other state laws. And so as a school district, we take our charge of non-discrimination very, very seriously, and certainly felt that we could not discriminate against transgender children. So what that means on the school is that it's very simple, really, that our transgender boys and girls get to go to school like all the other boys and girls. Right. They're not stigmatized, they are not ridiculed. We recognize them by their name and gender of identity. They attend class, participate in activities, use facilities, the same as all the other children, with the same rights, responsibilities, and obligations. So there's no difference there. What we wanted to do was to give students a place where they didn't have to lie. Yeah.
Where they didn't have to lie.
Where they didn't have to lie. Because when they come to school, we want them to say, yes, I'm here. I'm here in the full sense of the word. The majority of the time, their other students don't even realize, and oftentimes the teachers don't even know that this child is transgender. Because the parents come in, they work with the principal, maybe the school nurse, and those might be the only people on campus who know that this child is transgender. So they truly are coming to school feeling present and affirmed by their identity. Now, but you asked about problems.
Okay.
And
I think I know where you're going.
I have to say, again, we haven't really had the problems. I know people are worried about what's going to happen in the bathroom. We know that this is a natural function. We want children to go to the bathroom. We don't want children to go the whole day without going to the restroom. So we've got about 1,000 schools. So we've had a lot of experience with this, and we have never had a problem in the restroom because of a transgender student. That just has never occurred. We've never had anybody pretend to be transgender so that they can go sneaking in the bathroom. That has never happened. We are well prepared, as every school in this country has been, to respond to any kind of misconduct. So if there was misconduct in the bathrooms by any student for any reason, which happens, let's be clear, go on YouTube and you'll see all kinds of stuff.
No, actually, don't do that.
Oh, don't go on YouTube.
Okay. Stay with us.
Yes. Yeah, don't do that. It'll be bad. So yeah, that has not occurred. So, our transgender children are using the restrooms the same as everybody else, right? Just to do their business, fix their makeup, chat with friends, comb their hair, and then go back to class. And that's what the restrooms are for. So, and sometimes people ask, when they're really, really worried about this, I say, well, what has your experience been in the past? Because if you've ever used the facility, at the theater, at a concert, at a sporting event, at a mall, anytime somebody has used a restroom in a common area, I guarantee that we've used the restroom with somebody who is transgender. And we've been fine with it. Sometimes there are students who aren't quite comfortable, and what the schools can do, the way that we accommodate those students, is they can use a private facility, like in the nurse's office or maybe a faculty lounge, or sometimes we'll put a curtain. A lot of students are shy about their bodies for a number of reasons. Many, many reasons. Children are really uncomfortable, and if we find that our children are not accessing the facilities because they feel nervous, by all means we want to accommodate them.
Okay, so tell me, how has it been going?
It's been going great. It really has. The students are fine. I think that we've underestimated the capacity of students to be kind and caring. In fact, when the students in LA Unified have grown up having transgender classmates. And so we did an interview recently, and the students were like, it's fine, just no big deal. It's just another boy, another girl. So I think that the fears and worries that people have expressed are really unfounded. We've never, again, I want to repeat, we've never had anybody engaging in misconduct and trying to take advantage of the policies to engage in inappropriate behavior.
And you've had the policy since 2005.
Exactly.
So you've had certainly several years of seeing what the implications would be of a policy that supports. And I think I've heard you say also, Judy, that this policy really helps create more safety.
It does. It solves problems. It doesn't create them. It solves problems.
Certainly.
And for the respect and dignity of our students, we're never going to compromise that because some adults have some fears that something might happen. We can manage those situations, and we're not going to violate students' dignity, and we're certainly not going to discriminate against them because we're nervous that something might happen and we don't know how to deal with it. That's our job.
Yeah.
This is a good time I want to kind of segue from the schools and policies to talk about the role of families in supporting their students. Sarah, can you share some thoughts on what families can do?
Yeah, families are so important because every student wants to feel accepted and loved in their family. And certainly parents and guardians have a really important role because they help shape how we see our world, and they also help shape how we feel about ourselves. So regardless of if a family has a gender variant or transgender child, all families can model respectful behavior and how we interact with people who might be a little bit different than us, and they set a tone for how we relate to other people in school. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, a child's awareness of being a boy or girl or anywhere on that spectrum is really set, we can see it by age 4. Some studies and research has shown even earlier than then, and we know internally, again talking about what Judy was saying, we know internally where we fall or how we identify. And that's our sense of ourselves. That's our own personal knowledge. And that happens as early as 4. So this conversation is really important in elementary school, and creating a space for students to voice that and feel comfortable and feel that they are able to be themselves without us assuming just because of maybe the sex that was assigned at birth, that lines up with their gender. That's really important. I'm actually reminded of a story I heard last year of a parent in Germany. He has a young son, and his son loved to dress in skirts and dresses, and the family had no problem with it. And when the child got old enough to go to pre-K, first day of school, he wears his dress and his skirt just the same way he used to do at home. And unfortunately, he didn't have a positive experience. And the father was heartbroken to see how his child was treated. And so that father, the very next day, taking his child to preschool, decides, a very bold thing, I think, that he was going to wear a skirt. And so I think we can see a picture of how the father sends such a remarkable message of love and support. There's nothing more meaningful to a child than the support and the acceptance of their family, friends, teachers, and their community. And so this father walks into town wearing a skirt with his son. It's such a powerful message of that security and also that acceptance of their child.
I just love that picture.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
And we also have a clip of Zoe's mom telling us a little bit about her family's experience. Let's listen to Ophelia.
When Zoe came out to me and told me she wasn't sure whether she was gay or what was going on, and I wasn't surprised because I already knew. Zoe, at a very early age, when she was 4, 3, 2 years old, she was already expressing herself, not like her brother, per se. So I knew there was something different. And I hate using that word, but that's what it was, for a better word, for lack of words. So I knew what was going on. I just didn't know how I was going to take care of it or how I was going to work with it and help her through it. But when she did come out, it made it even more real because she was beginning to understand what was happening and who she was. She must have been about 8, 9 years old, just about. Some parents are not like me, that are willing to understand, willing to look for resources or help to understand what their child is going through or be accepting of it.
Wow.
That's an extraordinary mom.
Yeah, what a brave family.
And like she said, not all parents are like me.
Yeah. Certainly.
Any reactions that you had?
I'm really struck by how the family really wanted to support Zoe. And I think that I've seen a lot of families, really struggle with how do I understand what's going on with my child? And this is so different than what I had expected. And I know that Zoe's family mentioned, I think, that they didn't necessarily have very particular, strong, rigid gender roles in their household. So for their family to understand that she was coming out, that there was something going on with her, and then immediately go to a place of, this is something new, but we're going to be okay with it. I mean, it's just a really powerful story, and thank you for sharing that. It's really powerful.
You can see, do you have a reaction, Judy?
Yeah, I love how beautiful it was that the family was willing to listen to their child. I think that for, as being a parent, there's times where we need to stop talking and we need to start listening.
Yeah.
And this is a family who cared enough to listen.
And they could see from the very beginning who she was.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was like no question to me who she was.
Yeah, who she is with us
Is.
today. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to have a discussion with my two guests now about the implications of the policies, best practices, and what educators can do today. So, Sarah, what does a safe school environment look like?
Now you're going to put me to work, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
So important.
For our guests.
There are several areas that schools can make a difference, and I want to share some of those. I wish we had more time to get into all of them in depth, but I certainly think that easy access to supportive environments, right? Places on school campuses where young people feel supported. Inclusive school policies, much like LAUSD has had for many years now. An inclusive policy that enumerates sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and really outlines the responsibility of the school, of the staff, of everybody to include all students. Staff capacity to respond is another area that staff not only be responsible, but that they also have the capacity to do so. So there's some professional development there, and I think that there's also some area of looking at what staff is appropriate in responding and helping others on school campuses. And engaging parents. I think we really need to make sure that we maintain open communication with parents, engage them in this discussion, because half of the day they have the student, right? And although the student is with us part of the day, the rest of the day they're with the parents. So that's a really important thing. And this isn't certainly not last, but really important to highlight empowering our students, that they hear a message from us, that we're empowering them to be who they are, to feel, building those self-esteem and the building in them that comfortableness with who they are and knowing that they are celebrated and that they see themselves in our school and that they can identify role models. Those are all really positive and important protective factors, as you know, Rich, in developing a healthy coping mechanism and a healthy sense of self.
As we can see always that when kids grow up in nurturing environments and affirming homes, they decrease in risk. They increase in their resilience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Project Spin has recently partnered with an organization called Our Family Coalition. They're based out of San Francisco, and they oversee a program called Welcoming Schools, which we saw the video earlier out here on the West Coast. And as we talked about, Welcoming Schools is really a great resource for elementary schools with tools for professionals, as well as actually giving us lesson plans to utilize in talking with our students about this. And there are a couple areas in the classroom that I think are really important that we can talk about. And Welcoming Schools has some resources on that. And those areas are around embracing family diversity, really talking about gender stereotyping and the damage that can have, and so affirming all genders, ending bullying and name calling, and they do this by a long list of books, children's books, right? Is a great way to really dive into deeper conversation with, even in kindergarten, starting to identify diverse families. Just my family looks a little bit different than yours, and also how we treat each other and the impact that has.
Judy.
Well, and then let's drill down to the classroom level.
Yes.
Teachers have the capacity to create the environment. They are totally responsible for it. And children will follow the teacher's lead. And I think that all teachers want to create a classroom where the students feel welcomed, where they feel fully affirmed in participating. And there are some specific things that teachers can do to create that kind of welcoming campus, welcoming classroom. For some simple things that are really quite easy. For one thing, just be neutral in our language. Good morning, boys and girls, or even better yet, learn their names.
Yeah.
Recognize children by their names. So however the name is that they identify with. Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Rich, right? Recognizing them by their names. Avoid moments where children are being pigeonholed. We would not want a teacher to say, all the boys on one side of the room and all the girls on the other side of the room. That might also be a Title IX violation. So we really don't want to be sex stereotyping children like that and dividing them in that way. We could divide our class by, who has a dog, who has a cat, who has a fish, who has no pet, and find different ways to divide the class if you want to make a group. Allow students to expand their repertoire of possibilities. Don't say, well, these are the boys' books, for personal reading, and these are girls' books for personal reading, or these are boys' jobs, or these are girls' jobs. Really help children explore what could happen, what anybody could do. And so really giving them that freedom. And on that first day when we meet our children, so we've got the name on the roster, but I would just double check and say, what is the name that you would like me to call you? Our names mean so much. I mean, being called by our name, I think that, I know as adults, if we're called the wrong name, we immediately correct the other person. Immediately. That's not my name.
Certainly.
So with just by recognizing them and using their name and their gender that they identify with, that pronoun is going to make all the difference. The child's now going to trust that teacher, and that's what we want is trust in the classrooms.
I'm getting the idea of gender-neutral spaces. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sarah?
I think we also want to show all of our participants a list of resources that you can use in your classrooms and give them actual tools. So I brought a little video that I wanted to show and share with all of you today. It's called A Place in the Middle. And this video, I'm just so grateful to the director and the producers of this film because it's such a great resource in helping us understand what are some of the cultural values and also what have we missed in our own society in understanding gender and how we can see a school taking this conversation and really applying it. I won't say anything more. Let's just watch it.
See, when you first look at me, oh yeah, are you a boy? I'm like, no.
Hanani is a mixture of a girl and a boy. She's a good hula dancer. She plays ukulele. She sings. I mean, everybody accepts it. It's not like a big thing. Yeah.
Listen to my voice.
Long ago, the people of Hawaii lived in the spirit of aloha. Every person had their role in society, whether male, female, or mahu. Those who embraced both the feminine and masculine traits that are embodied in each one of us. Mahu were valued and respected as caretakers, healers, and teachers of ancient tradition, passing on their sacred knowledge from one generation to the next through hula and chant.
Wow.
That's beautiful. Judy.
Wow. I'm so struck with just the awareness, the awakening of the ethnocentrism that we all have. You know, we're born, we're born and raised in a culture, and we think that our culture reflects the entire world. But this film was so powerful. Just that little thing make me take a step back and think, gee, what else isn't necessarily the grand truth? It was just my experience.
Yeah, and the way that this video really showcases that other cultures have valued really and given high esteem to individuals who have represented both masculine and feminine qualities.
Yes.
And maybe now our language in our culture identifies that person as transgender or gender variant, but in other cultures they're really revered and seen with such high esteem.
Exactly.
It's a really powerful
It's a
clip.
wake-up call.
I'd love it. No big deal.
No big deal. No big deal.
Okay. Another question coming in. Okay, from a 4th grade teacher. This is Teresa from Thousand Oaks. Okay. I am a 4th grade teacher, and I do my best to follow policies and make my classroom safe. My students are too young to know if they are transgender. Why is it important for me to talk about it when they are so young?
Oh, that's a great question. I think Teresa, you have a great question because a lot of people wonder, if I don't have a transgender child in my class, why should I do anything different? And part of the, one of my questions back is, if you did have a transgender child in your class, what would you do different? And if you would do something different, why not do it now? Because you never know who might have a family member who is transgender, or they maybe identify as transgender or gender variant, and making all of those changes just part of your profession, just the way you do your work. I think it's a good segue in how we can apply this to the classroom. Judy, what else would you recommend?
I think that we want to start teaching self-esteem from day one,
Yeah.
and we certainly want our transgender children to have self-esteem. We also want them to be very caring about the other. And lastly, I just want to throw in one last stat. Out of the CDC, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, found that 0.5% of high school students on one of their surveys self-identified as transgender, which is huge because it means that we have a lot more transgender children, or children who are thinking about their gender, than we ever realized.
Good time to talk resources.
Okay.
Great questions all along. So, Sarah, let's talk resources. Can you talk to us about your website?
Certainly. Project Spin, projectspin.org, is a website that we have lots of resources for educators, parents, and youth. And we try to not replicate anything that's already out there, but really bring together resources that we've pulled from lots of organizations. And if you know something that we don't have up there, we will certainly put it up there, because we want to make sure that it's a place that contains as much support for people as possible.
So let's get that traffic to the website.
Great.
Judy.
And while you're at it, visit LA Unified, humanrelations.lausd.net, and anybody can access it, and we have wonderful resources on there for teachers and students and parents alike.
You know, I have to say, sometimes LAUSD takes a lot of shots for being, huge, but I think some of their primary prevention programs and their policies and procedures set the tone for America.
Oh, certainly.
I really do.
We're
I
honored.
really do.
Certainly, yes.
To close our webcast, we asked Zoe's mom, Ophelia, to give us a message for those who would be joining us today. Here's what they wanted to share with you.
Today I can say that there have been a couple of teachers, administrators that have done good things, and they've impacted us. Yes, accepting a conversation openly about her being transgender, accepting of how she should be treated at school, listening when she has come to them with a problem or an issue, and following through, investigating and correcting, doing some correcting or trying to correct. Another example is allowing her to be herself and not to making her feel that she's like the oddball in school. Schools can help parents of transgender students by having information, resources, and there's a wealth of information out there now. I found that there are some really incredible support systems for parents of transgender kids. First one is TIFA, Trans Youth Family Allies, Transforming Families. They're incredible. They meet every Sunday. They're part of the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. So it's a wealth of information for parents and teachers, educators. They can use this too.
You know, we've got another question that came in. I know we're right up against, but I'd like to go. I'd like to go for it. This question: how can teachers, counselors, school psychologists, and school personnel support students when their families are not supportive of their children's identity?
That's a great question. You know, families have their own process as well, and parents need to also be given resources and given support. They have their own, process of accepting and kind of going through shock, and then ultimately seeing that maybe this doesn't change too much of who their child has always been. And I know that the LA Gay and Lesbian Center has a lot of resources for families and can help parents wherever they are in their process, and having a space of really going through that and figuring out what is their response and how can they respond with acceptance. How can they respond with, you are my child, I love you, and I will get the resources I need. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for addressing how to support the parents. Now, in that situation with the child, I mean, sometimes as schools, what we do is we give that child an oasis. This is your place where you can feel safe, where you can feel affirmed. Just that one safe place can be very, very powerful. Sometimes we just need to teach children coping skills and strategies, and sometimes they need to manage difficult situations. It's an adult challenge that sometimes we have to teach our children.
And schools are so important in creating a place for students. If they don't have the support of family or the acceptance in their family immediately, they know that they can come to at least one supportive person at school or supportive entity. And we hope that, especially after this webinar, even more people are encouraged to be visible as that support.
Right. And it's important to know that regardless, we cannot discriminate against our children, even if somebody wants us to.
Well, these are some wonderful final comments, and I really appreciate your participation today. I really want to thank Sarah and Judy for their insightful comments, and I am certain that the LA Gay and Lesbian Center and Los Angeles Unified School District take a great deal of pride in their expertise, their leadership, and the inevitable impact they have on the lives of their students.
Thanks, Rich. Thank you so much.
And we also want to thank our video guests, the incredible Zoe and her mom Ophelia, two of the most courageous people we know, for their incredible contributions to this webcast. We want to thank Welcoming Schools and A Place in the Middle for sharing their wonderful resources. And we want to thank all of you out there for joining us today. If you'd like a copy of today's PowerPoint or sample lesson plans and other resources mentioned during today's show, please visit us at preventsuicide.laco.edu. From our great teams at LACO Communications and the Center for Distance and Online Learning, I'm Rich Lieberman. You take care and take care of those you love.